the things that we are faced with. I think on the airport, however, we also have some challenges there because we have the brand new Laguindingan Airport and there are no night lights to operate it, no all-weather gadgets to operate it at night. I think we should accompany all of these modern airports that we're building in the provinces with capability for all weather and night landing if possible. That will relieve the traffic here in Naiya and also should shift some of that to Clark. That will do a lot of good.
Secretary Singson, would you like to respond?
That's very correct, and that's why part of our program has been the convergence also with the Department of Transport and Communication. No? Classic example, as you mentioned, would be our regional and international airports. They're completed, but the access to these airports are usually local roads. So you have very narrow roads leading to the airports. So we have taken over the access to airports, seaports, and ro-ro ports. We want to put them into national standards, national road standards, wide with paved shoulders and so on. So we're taking over the access to airports, seaports, ro-ro ports. The OTC will confine themselves to the main facility, but access, we are developing it according to national road standards.
Thank you.
We're now waiting for the completion, by the way, of that Lipa to Batangas widening of the highway, which is ongoing now, because we're really going to try to push the traffic to Batangas. We've asked the EDC, Export Development Council, and PEZA, because the locators are in the south of Metro Manila who should go to Batangas. It can only take 300 to 400,000 containers. So we don't want to overload it, but we certainly want to shift that much to Batangas. And that will relieve, I think, it will remove about 2,000 trucks from Manila. So that should help the traffic situation.
Maria, may I add, we just completed the transport logistics plan for the whole of Mindanao. And this will integrate seaport, ro-ro port, and the road network. This is part of the how we can reduce the cost of transport Mindanao in and out, no? Meaning Mindanao to Manila and Mindanao out of for export.
And Secretary Singson, how do you deal with the fact that this isn't infrastructure. I'm fastened on the cabotage law. But let us go to our last panelist. We saved the best for last. The most contentious, well, let's not say the most contentious. Let's talk about power. Let's talk about electricity rates. Your assessment. Power, electricity has been in the headlines.
First of all, the market prices and the aberrations that happened in November are still being investigated, and there are a lot of accusations and counter-accusations, and I really don't wish to delve into that. But the fundamentals are this. First, we live in a country that is hit by volcanoes, typhoons. We live on fault lines, and we sit in a tropical, salty environment. Those three factors alone should tell you that you should be having at least 20 to 30% reserves in the market, or you will be hit with some radical pricing at the wrong time. What happened was we got hit with Yolanda and we knocked off 800 megawatts of geothermal. At the same time, we were planning on putting Camago Malampaya for maintenance. At the same time, some others had some of their own problems. So it most likely is a perfect storm. I don't know about the collusion issues. I can't speak to that. We're not party to any of that. We as a company would not ever do something like that. But having said that, it is a very difficult situation. And currently, you should be 20 to 30% reserves based on your peak. And we're not even close to that. I think this summer we'll hit about 5% reserves based on our peak. So we're way behind. It takes 5 to 7 years to build a power plant. And that's from inception to it finally being commissioned and in the process. So we have a lot of work to do in our sector. And we have several people in charge of making sure that happens. It is a spot market that tells you when there are shortages. It's like you go to Balintawak, and if there has been a difficult traffic problem getting into Balintawak, the price of galunggong goes up because there's a supply problem. Same thing happens in the market. So we have to build more power plants. The last major power plant that was built is ours, that is just recently being completed, but 10 years prior to that, nothing was built of any major significance. We can't do that. Plants age because they get old, just like a car gets old. And not only that, the economy is growing, we have more people, therefore we have to build more power plants.
So it seems we can distill the power problem in 3 words. Targets, meaning we should be building the plants that will actually get us the supply. Second word is supply, and the third word is demand. With Epira and WISM the way it is, it's a market that actually operates on the idea of excess supply, right? Given that we don't have the supply to meet the demand right now, does this system work? And if you say it doesn't, what will make it work in the interim period?
Well, actually, the market is supposed to send signals to builders and distribution utilities. You better get your act together because you're not going to be able to supply all of your customers. So when the market sends that spike through the roof, that's an early indication that you have a problem and you don't have enough supply. Your plants are getting old. You're spending more time maintaining them. Or you have a problem. Well, we have a problem in the Philippines in that our renewable sector is most available when we need it the least. It's when it's coldest, the wind is blowing, we don't turn on the air cons. When we have a typhoon, we don't turn on the air cons either. So here we have all this excess at a period when we don't need it. So again, that's where we have to build with everything in mind and have to build for the complete thought of what is needed. And our distribution utilities need to be able to tell us what they need, and they need to sign contracts in order to get it done. If they don't sign contracts, the developer can't get a loan from a bank. So it doesn't happen.
So those signals, Secretary Singson, the signals he said that were sent by the market were sent out before this administration came into office. We needed to have more production plants, right? What's the discussion like in the cabinet in terms of why is it so slow?
As far as Secretary Petilla's view is concerned, because of the EPIRA, government cannot be in the power generation. In fact, we're mandated to sell. Unfortunately, the investment climate, private investments wait for the very, very clear signal that there will be a shortfall. And that's where you have the problem of, are the investors just waiting for the right time to make the investments in spite of the fact that they're seeing already a forthcoming shortage? They don't want to advance to invest too early and just to catch the demand requirement.
Dan, go ahead.
Secretary Singson is absolutely correct that it has been given over to the private sector, and the DOE does not have to have the right to enter into contracts. And he's absolutely correct. Some of the people have waited too late, too long before they've invested. Now, to be fair, there are a number of the current players that have major plans to proceed forth, but all of them are reliant on contracts to be signed because they can't get a loan unless they have the contract. So that mismatch needs to be addressed by the proper authority, which I think in this case would be the Energy Regulatory Commission and the Congress, which enforces the franchises given to the different distribution utilities.
So you are one of the lucky ones to open a plant now, right? During this, well, lucky or not lucky, but from your end, your perspective, how do you look at it being in the Philippines at this point in time? And what would you like to see? You talked about getting the contracts signed, which is a complaint many businessmen have said about the administration. I'll come back to you with that later, Secretary Singson.
Well, contracts are very tough because in the case of a distribution utility, for example, under the law, there are two kinds of customers. One is called a contestable, the other is called a captive. The captive is easy for the distribution utility to take care of because all he has to do is bid out the contract, put it before the ERC, get it approved, and move forward, which is what we did with all of our contracts. The difficulty for the distribution utility is, and a number of you are contestable customers, is they go to company X and they say, are you willing to sign a long-term contract to be supplied by us, the distribution utility? And the guy says, I'm not maybe going to be here tomorrow. And yet he's going to be there for the next 20 years because he has no choice. And the problem was we never let the market do the damage to the people that did not plan. My apologies for putting it that way, but when you go to Balintawak and there aren't enough galunggong in the market, you plan to either go early or buy more and put in the refrigerator so you're not caught like that again. So,
Secretary Singson, your response to this? I mean, it goes back. I know it's not really you. It's but since you are privileged, you're in the privileged communications.
No, as,
what does it
as
look
I
like?
said, it's really a tug of war between the market players. No, I believe if Secretary Petilla had his way, he would have entered into a contract already for power generation, paid for a base rated capacity, and take that risk. Unfortunately, he's not allowed under the APIRA.
Do
Can
you
I say
please,
something
sir.
for the users?
Yes, please,
Well,
definitely.
this is a
We want lower electricity
confluence
rates.
of events that caused the shortage. But, the users have been penalized before during the brownout days. We got 1,000 megawatts of emergency gensets. And even the new buildings that are going up now for BPOs are all fitted with emergency gensets. So they could have called on this. In other words, in Mindanao and Visayas, they already have load shedding program. And we could have done that. We could have participated.
I guess part of it is the assumption that the government, that the country can supply its own electricity without private citizens having to have backup supplies. This is one of the key problems that the Philippines faces. We see it in international reports. We see it in business analyst reports. How do you address? One of the concerns is that our electricity prices are too high, that the contracts aren't being signed enough. Going into the last 2 minutes, is what kind of thinking is coming from the administration?
Secretary Petilla was just relating the situation in Mindanao. They had the supply in certain areas, but people were not even willing to pay the right price for that supply. So it's really a very complicated issue. I wouldn't want to propose at this time any solution. I think I will leave it to our good Secretary of Energy, Petilla, to address that problem.
Dan, last question, and I'll put you on the hot seat again. APIRA, WISM, given the present situation, it's clear it doesn't work. Let me ask you that. Does it work? Does it not work?
The law is very well crafted and should work. We have to tighten up the enforcement of the people responsible for each sector. And I don't want to be pointing fingers because I'm not the authority on any sector other than my own, which is generation. We did our homework. We went out and we found contracts. We found little co-ops and small distribution utilities. We banded them together. We put together 600 megawatts of contracts. We built it. And our customers, once we're fully commissioned, should be enjoying the benefit of a price which is very reasonable. Our price is a long-term price for 15 years, which is way below the market price of the WESM on average, let alone the spike. So clearly, the market has worked and we've proven it. Our investors are some of the largest investors in the world, and they have participated with us. In the case of the debt, we have international debt as well as local debt. So we achieved what was needed to be achieved under IPIRA. But I think there needs some tighter and stricter requirements on making sure that the distribution utility identifies his contestable market and his captive. And if a contestable market person in that market says, I don't want to be supplied by you, then Meralco or any other distribution utility should say, okay, you're on your own, take the risk of the market or sign your contract and let it go. But somebody has to be responsible for each set of customers. And that job needs to be done. And the only way for that to happen is to fully implement open access directly and hold people responsible and not try to rescue or enable.
Interesting. I want to dig deeper, but we're running out of time. There are lots of questions there, including the parts on collusion. But let's move away from it and let's open the floor to questions. Please, if you have any questions, you can go up to the mic. We are getting questions on text, but I'm told we cannot give them to our panelists now. You should get some responses from Arrancada's organizers. There's one question here for Secretary Singson while we're waiting for you to think of good questions for our panelists. Secretary Singson, while the increased investments in infrastructure have been laudable, the bulk of the amounts appear centered on vehicle-centric investments. Is there a parallel plan to invest in pedestrian-friendly infrastructure, sidewalks, bicycle lanes, green zones, and mass transport?
Yes, the OTC has lined up a lot of the mass transport expansion capacities for Metro Manila. They are also planning some bus rapid transport system for the other urban centers like Cebu and possibly Davao. In terms of pedestrian-friendly roads, we're fully supportive of the Share the Road program with pedestrians and bike lanes to keep them open for certain days, like a Sunday. You allow bike lanes, pedestrians to share major thoroughfares. So yes, we are aware of this move away from being too dependent on vehicles.
What about we haven't really talked about airports. I just came from Singapore, which gets you in and out of the airport in less than 20 minutes. The facilities that they have, we've been talking about the airport, NAIA, for a long time. It's in Arrancada's reports as well. How far along are we to deliver the kind of infrastructure that our tourism secretary says he needs to be able to bring in more tourists?
That's correct. We have a commitment from the Department of Transport and Communication to finally finish the Terminal 3 and Terminal 1 in time for the APEC. Now, having said that, you will see a very different look Terminal 1 once that's completed. There's still an advantage of an in-city airport. You might have the biggest airport in Clark, but it will take you about an hour to go to the Makati and even to Alabang. No? Whereas if you have an in-city terminal that is not the widest airport, but convenient and comfortable enough, but you are in your hotel room in a matter of 25 minutes, I think I would still love an in-city terminal.
Fantastic. Any questions from the audience? Please, John. John Forbes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Francis Romero from Jones Lang LaSalle. I have a question for DPWH and PPP. You mentioned earlier, sir, that you have been facelifting the airport in preparation for the APEC summit. So I just would like to ask, what are other priority projects that the DPWH and the PPP has in priority to support DOT's Secretary Jimenez's claim that 2015 will be called parang Visit the Philippines year and for the summit as well?
Well, as I mentioned, we have a 53 billion program to support the tourism master plan. That's nationwide. And that's a total of about 2,000 kilometers of access to tourism destinations. Now, also, I might as well mention, we're starting to convert our national roads into numerical designations. So pretty soon you will see a Highway 1 sign from Cagayan Valley, or actually starts in Ilocos Norte, all the way to the city of Zamboanga, following an N1 highway, Highway 1. So you will have, we are starting to designate our national roads numerically. Because what's happening now is, for example, MacArthur Highway, as you pass one province, the local ordinances are passed that changes the name of that national road. So what we've done is do a numerical designation of our national highways.
Any other questions from the audience? We have 4 minutes left, and John is coming up. Go ahead.
Well, I can't resist, Maria, but I haven't heard the word rail quite enough. And I'm not so much thinking of intercity rail, but there is a JICA plan that, if I recall, Secretary Balasacan requested when he went to Tokyo. It was in the press a little bit a few months ago, but I'm wondering if it's really being adopted by this administration. I know it'll take 10 years, but the goal was very ambitious, and it seems absolutely necessary, and I'm wondering if people could comment on that.
Yes, I fully agree with you. We should do more rail projects. You know, when I was with BCDA, if there was a single project that we wanted to undertake, it was the North Rail. That to us was a very important component of the whole basis conversion development program. Unfortunately, somehow when they started to implement it, it ended up in this struggle over with China. Again, I still feel that if there's any single project that we should be undertaking, it is a rail that will connect Clark and Subic. The Subic, the ECITEX, when we designed that and we started buying the road right-of-way, there is already a provision for right-of-way for rail. Okay, so we bought enough right-of-way to have a provision for rail between ECITEX, Subic, Clark, and Tarlac. Okay, so I'm a believer of mass transport.
Fantastic. Let me just give the... Okay, one last. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Volker Steigerwald from German International Cooperation. I would like to raise the question regarding energy. How important actually is massive, not activities, but maybe promotion of energy efficiency in all this situation that we have at this point in time? The second one is, of course, renewable energies. Specifically, renewable energies are, of course, very suitable for small island situations when we have somehow hybrid systems. But it might be, if you look at renewables for a long-term competitiveness perspective, that they really should be even more promoted in the Philippines.
I'm not an expert on renewable, although we've done a number of studies on wind and some solar, and have made some investments. Again, the renewable is a good area for us, especially solar, especially as prices have come down. So when it's really competitive, I think the real argument has been between the economists of this country, and I really haven't participated in that, but the argument is we should not subsidize renewable because we are poor enough as a country. And I hear the long-term argument, and I think that that is accurate, and we should also focus on that, but that's the issue on renewable. The first part of your question, I forgot now. What was it?
Conservation.
Demand-side management. I think that has already occurred very naturally in the country because of high prices of energy, and that is the purpose of the market. I know at my house I had a chandelier which had 29 watt light bulbs, and I replaced them all with 3.5 watt LED lights, and I get more light out of it, and I get 1/10 the consumption. So it naturally occurs when prices are high, because every time I pay for my electric bill, I say, how can I save money? So I think by nature it does that, by natural economic forces.
Can I just toss it to each one of you? 1 minute, your last thoughts.
We need supply. We're growing at a rate. When I arrived in the Philippines, I think the population was 14 million back in 1957. I was 3 years old. Today we're 100 million, and we need a lot of power. The country of Korea, I think, has 100,000 megawatts and 40 million people. I think we have roughly 14,000 megawatts for roughly 100 million people.
Thank you. Sir?
You know, during the brownout days, we had a very enlightened utility company called Cepalco in the south, Cagayan de Oro. In order to save electricity or cut down on demand, they volunteered to distribute energy efficiency lamps on the condition that they get paid based on the savings. They lost money on this because the people would not pay for these lamps. And the reason is because unlike electricity, you can get cut off for not paying your electricity bill. But they could not cut off for not being able to collect on the lamps.
Fantastic.
PPP remains an open option for procurement in all types of infrastructure projects, whether hard infra or social infrastructure projects. So we would like to encourage more investments from the private sector, and we hope we could contribute a significant growth in our GDP for this year.
Thanks, Sherry.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we will continue to grow in our investments in infrastructure. My challenge to this group, and especially to the contractors who are present, do your job right. I mean, let's forget the hanky-panky that has been happening in the past. You will have more than enough contracts that you can chew. We will give you, we will pay you right on time, but do your job right.
An incredible panel. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panels today. I need to give a special congratulations. I've been chairing this panel for 3 years, and I remember the first year was why we were growing so slowly, because Secretary Sixto actually put in the institutional checks to stop corruption in his sector. And as we've gone on, we've seen the problem shift among all of the different sectors. But thank you very much. We've seen progress. Let's keep going. Arrancada.
Thank you so much to our moderator, Maria Ressa, and our panelists, Dr. Daniel Chalmers, Attorney Sherry Ann Austria, and Mr. Meneleo Carlos. We are also distributing the evaluation forms now. If you could kindly complete them and give them to our ushers at the end of the session. And now to give us an overview of the Arrancada Philippines Forum and to introduce the keynote speaker, may we call on the President of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Philippines, Mr. Takashi Ishigami.